Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening. My name is Councillor Val Springett and I'm the Chair of the Licensing Committee. I'm pleased to welcome you to this meeting of the committee this evening. The meeting will be broadcast live and is recorded for playback on the Council's YouTube channel. Will anybody else be recording the proceedings this evening? I ask so that people at the meeting will know if this is happening. Members should only address the meeting by way of their microphones, which should be turned off when you finish speaking, please. We're not expecting a fire drill this evening. However, if this occurs, please remain seated while members of the Democratic Services team assess the situation and give further instructions on the evacuation of the building if necessary. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies. Apologies have been received from Councillors Bryant, Grigg, Parfitt Reid and J. Sams. Are there any other apologies? This is for councillors. Thank you. Councillor Hinder, I understand you may need to leave after item 13.
If I may be excused, Chair, after item 13, I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, that's noted. Have we got any substitute members here this evening? Councillor Russell?
Councillor Russell for Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Any other substitutes? No, thank you. Urgent items. I've agreed to take an urgent update on relating to item 14, which is licence fees and charges for 2022-23, which is relating to an updated table of the table shown on page 62, where some of the figures weren't quite correct. So I think you've all had this update, and are you happy for me to accept that? Well, thank you very much. Visiting members. Have we got any visiting members? Ashley, are you going to speak?
Yes. Item 13, Councillor Kimmins.
Thank you, Councillor Kimmins. Item 5 is disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures by members and officers? Thank you. Item 6, disclosures of lobbying. Have any members been lobbied? Councillor Nagy, yes. Thank you. Could I come round? Councillor Nagy, which item? I presume it's
item 13.
Item 13, thank you. Councillor Garton?
Same.
Thank you. And Councillor Hinder?
The same, Chair.
Thank you. And I've also been lobbied on item 13 as well. Thank you. Item 7, to consider whether any item should be taken in private because of the possible disclosure of exempt information. I've got no yellow papers in my agenda, so I'm happy to take all items in public. Are you happy for me to do that? Thank you. Item 8, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September 2021. Has anybody got any comments on those minutes to make? Thank you. So I move that the minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September 2021 be agreed as a correct record and signed. Thank you. Item 9 is minutes of the Licensing Act Subcommittee held on the 17th of September 2021. Again, have anybody got any comments on those minutes? Are you happy for me to accept them? Thank you. I move that the minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee meeting held on the 17th of September 2021 be agreed as a correct record and signed. And the last lot, minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee meeting held on the 11th of October 2021. Again, are there any comments anyone has on those minutes? Are you happy for me to accept them? Thank you. So I move that the minutes of the Licensing Act 2003 Subcommittee held on the 11th of October 2021 be agreed as a correct record and signed. Thank you. Item 11 is question and answer session for members of the public. There's no questions being submitted by members of the public this evening. Item 12 is questions from members to the chairman. We've had no questions submitted for the chairman this evening. So that moves us straight on to item 13, one of the main items this evening, which is the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Knowledge Test. Prior to the report's introduction, we've got several public speakers to address the committee. Each individual is entitled to up to 3 minutes, but there is an overall time limit of 12 minutes for this session. So if I could ask you, please, if what you want to say has been said before, could you perhaps curtail so we don't hear the same thing again, and then hopefully everybody will be able to fit in and have their say. So according to the list here, I have the first person to speak is John Liandolo. If you'd like to come to the microphone, Mr. Liandolo. Thank you.
Good evening, officers and councillors. Graham Gardner won't be attending tonight. He's down to speak. He has had to go and drive because he hasn't got any drivers. Anyway, I hope you've had time to take a good look at our proposal and can see that all angles of safety have now been addressed, and this will eventually lead to a high level of qualified drivers in our borough. Note, any new driver will have attended a seminar covering 41 points of ECU safeguarding training and 8 points of council policy, in addition to a full criminal record bureau check, a driving standards agency test and a medical before having the proposed temporary badge. I have read with interest that within the officer's report, which recommends refusal of the proposal, but there have been no reported complaints to the council about a lack of private hire vehicles or drivers. I can explain that with a few statistics I've compiled from last Saturday. We received over 1,200 calls, we completed 790 journeys, and 138 calls were unanswered. Approximately 300 to 400 customers were refused service. Most customers turned away, complained about it, and not one of them was happy. We have complaints about a lack of service or late running every day and deal with them at the time. It's not easy to tell young girls and boys waiting in town late at night that they can't have a safe journey home. To complain to MBC about service levels is not where the customers go. They complain to us, the operators. We've never had so many complaints about the lack of availability. Where do you complain to MBC, Maidstone Borough Council? You can't contact the department easily. There's often no reply to emails, and the department is closed 4 out of 5 days. Look it up on the internet, and there is not a pathway to complain. It's not easily found at all. Often a trade-off is needed when safety is at stake, and new, innovative action is required quickly. That's why I hope you will all vote to recommend the new amended proposal. I think we should just make it clear that we all feel as if we're on the same side when it comes down to safety and standards, and we have been very, very careful to make sure that safety is paramount. And this proposal will keep people safe. And something's going to happen if it's not passed. That's my fear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Could I just ask you quickly, who was it you said couldn't attend to speak? Was it Graham Gardner?
Yes, it was.
It was. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next on the list I have Jason Brown. Thank you.
Good evening, officers and councillors. I'm the operations manager of Express, and I've been with the company 13 years, but in the private hire and Hackney trade for over 20. In this time, I've obtained my Tunbridge and Malling dual badge, Maidstone private hire badge, and also have a full bus licence. I regularly cover a 16-seater run transporting vulnerable children from home to school and return. For me to be able to cover these journeys for the KCC, I needed the following qualifications: a bus licence, a CPC card, which is 35 hours of training over 5 years, and an enhanced CRB. My licence gives me the ability to drive a double-decker or minibus full of school children and or vulnerable passengers. Can I ask, what is the difference in my role as a bus driver to a private hire driver? Both are pre-booked, therefore I can plan my route. Both require me to have an enhanced CRB. Both require me to have a DSA test. Maidstone Borough Council requires me to have all of these, plus a knowledge test and an equo test, not training. A quote from Shane Bushell, the Client Transport Manager of KCC. I would expect licensing to be aware of the challenges faced across the country, let alone in a district with driver shortages. The licensing officers can always contact us in regards for an update, and we will happily explain our current position with them if it helps. I would really appreciate your comments on the reasons for the vast differences in the two test requirements needed to undertake two similar job roles. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I've now got Jade Collier. Thank you.
Good evening, officers and councillors. My name's Jade and I've worked for Express for 20 years. One of my job roles is to prepare new drivers for the knowledge test. I took the test myself this year, mainly so I could understand the process better and improve the training that we give to our candidates. I would just like to talk to you about my personal experience. I sat my first test on July the 14th this year and was informed I had failed 1 week later. I had to wait 3 weeks before I could resit my second test, which I also failed. I spent many weeks revising the questions and the policy and felt that I'd indeed given the correct answers and couldn't see any other possible answers I could give on my third attempt. So, on the 11th of August, after querying my result, I was told the test system was indicating the wrong answers and I'd actually answered all correctly on the first test and had now passed the knowledge test overall. I had to wait until the 8th of September to sit my equo test, which I passed. I was finally issued my badge on the 14th of October. The process took me 13 weeks. We are still uncovering inaccuracies and confusing terminology with potential candidates as we go through the process. From our experience and from Maidstone's own 5 working day reply policy, if an applicant was to fail the knowledge and equo test twice, it can potentially take up to 198 days, which is 6.3 months, to pass the test. This is before a CRB, a DSA and a medical. The cost of a driver failing twice on each test, along with other costs to become a licensed driver, is £655. The whole process is very long-winded and costly and extremely off-putting when trying to recruit new drivers. While we appreciate all knowledge is necessary, it would be great if this process could be improved going forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I've now got Ben Akers. Thank you.
Officers and councillors.
Yeah, there you go.
That's better. Good evening, officers and councillors. I operate Streamline Taxis, one of the larger companies, and we are having exactly the same problem as you've already been described, so I won't try to add to that. We are in a desperate situation. We've all invested heavily in this industry, and our night economy is suffering because of it. The safety of angle cannot be stressed strongly enough. The proposal put forward by us as a group is a strong one, and we would really appreciate you voting strongly for it. I reiterate Jason's comments. I am also in exactly the same position. I can drive any bus you like with as many disabled children or people concerned, but all the training necessary and all the training ongoing, and yet to get a Maidstone Borough Council private hire licence is absolutely abysmal. We have drivers that again have failed time and time again, and recently found that they should have actually passed. And the time taken to do this is unbelievably strenuous on any new driver wanting to come into the industry. Not only has he got to find over £600 to do so, but it takes 6 months to do so. By the time he's got that, he's off on another job because he needs to earn the money and earn a living. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Akers. Thank you. The next person I have to speak is Bob Viet. Is it Vich? Vich? Apologies for Vich. Sorry if I pronounced it incorrectly.
Good evening, councillors. My name is Bob Veach. I'm the operator at Apollo Taxis. I just want to reiterate, there is a real crisis in our industry. We are unable to meet demand at all. A lot of people left the industry through the lockdown, and we are now struggling to recruit. We are recruiting in exactly the same market as unregulated industries such as food delivery, parcel delivery. If you want to go and start a job with one of those type of companies, you can get a job within a matter of a week or so. If you want to get a job in a private hire company, you're going to take 6 months, or it's going to cost about £600. What the proposal that's been in front of you is going to reduce some of those barriers. It will speed up the operation. There is no risk to safety as a result of it, and we would put our back in behind the proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vich. And the last one I have to speak at the moment is Mr. Mark Jones. Thank you.
Good evening, officers and councillors. My name is Mark Jones and I own Sapphire Cars. I've got a little story to tell. Back in August this year, a young girl came to my office for a cab home. It was early Sunday morning, about 2:30. I had an office full of customers, so she was told she would have to wait about an hour and a half. The young girl said she would have to wait as she's got no other way of getting home. As my office was full, she went to wait outside. A male came up to her and started talking to her. He then started grabbing her and he took her around to the back of my office where he tried to rape her. Luckily enough, my office has CCTV and my controller saw what was happening, and she and a member of my staff, security staff, went to her aid. My controller was punched in the face by the man as well, but eventually they managed to get the girl away from the man and eventually he was arrested. This could have been avoided if we had enough drivers. And to get the customers home, and including the man that attacked her, he would have gone home earlier. This is not a one-off, this happens regularly. I have less than half the drivers I used to have working a Saturday night, and we turn 4 times the amount of work away than we actually do. I don't know any other business that can carry on like that. I emailed the council back in April and warned of what was going to happen, but was told once business picks up, drivers will come back. No chance. Why would they? They can deliver food without all the hassle of getting licensed, paying over £500 to get it, and work for a council that seems to work against us instead of with us. They also would not have to put up with all the drunks, antisocial behaviour and abuse delivering food that we get doing our job. I don't think you have any idea of what it's like on any given evening in Maidstone. It's full of undesirables, and Maidstone is going to be a rundown town before much longer, because decent people will not come into the town where stabbings, street fighting and abuse is commonplace. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. I will now ask Sharon Bamborough to introduce the report, please. Thank you. Did I? I apologise profusely. Okay, I'll let him speak, Dad. I do apologise, Mr Dyer. Would you like to speak? I'm ever so sorry. I'm not sure how I did that. I do apologise. We have... Yeah. Technically, there's only 20 seconds left of the 12 minutes. However, if you can just obviously highlight anything, I do have a discretion to allow you to speak as a third party invited, and in view of the fact that I missed you out, I am prepared to do that if the committee are happy for me to do that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you very much for your indulgence. I won't keep you long. What I would like to say is you've heard from various people here the situation we're in. And we feel that as a community that we are, that the lip service is being paid to us, not real attention. There is a wealth of experience and know-how here that operates on the ground level of taxiing in Maidstone, that has done for years and will hopefully continue to do so if we can have a bit of common sense with the proposals that have been put forward, especially about the equo. The equo, just to take a test, anybody can learn parrot fashion and take a test with answers. Why when they get a speeding fine, why do they have a half-day course without a test? Because you learn more through sitting there doing a course and taking physical part in it than what you do by doing a test. And what Mr. Angelo's put together is something we've all spoken about, and it is a very strong situation highlighted. You're getting a dwindling bus service from Arriva that is gradually going down and down and down by the day, and the taxis are doing the same because we can't get drivers. I cannot impress upon you enough, and hope you will take on board these things and be a bit favourable to the situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Dyer. I apologise for missing you out. That wasn't intentional. Thank you. Sorry, I'll come back now to Sharon Bamber to present the report.
Thank you, Chair. As you'll know, this matter was brought before committee in September and was adjourned in order to gather more data on the ongoing knowledge tests taking place and the echo tests. And then it was referred back to tonight's meeting for a final decision as to whether or not any change to policy should happen in terms of Maidstone's approach, and if that it was proposed and agreed to, it would have to go out to consultation. So just to make it clear for everybody, any decision made here tonight cannot be a decision about the actual proposal going live from, say, December or anything like that. It would have to go to consultation to the trade and the public. That said, we're not unsympathetic to what the trade is saying. However, our role as a licensing authority and yourselves as the licensing committee, we're here to, well, enforce the legislation and make sure everybody's licensed who should be licensed, and making sure that effectively the trade that are there providing that service, it's fit and proper for the public to use and it's safe. And the rule of thumb, the general test is, you know, would you be happy to let a member of your family go in a taxi cab if this person was driving, or if an untested person was driving? As you know, our recommendation for this part of the report is to refuse the proposal, and that's based on our belief that in doing away with the requirement to sit, study the policy, then sit the knowledge test, and also the safeguarding training and the test for that, which is part of the new national standards, would then lead us into a situation where we are very much out of kilter with the rest of the county, as well as probably the country. I've reached out and across Kent to ask, is anybody else running a system where they don't have some kind of knowledge test, and everybody is doing some kind of similar testing. I'm not saying it's to the standard we do it. I think Maidstone already had very high standards before the national standards came in, and so that echo test, which is the safeguarding element, is the new additional part on top of what we were already doing. And the fact that we hadn't needed to add much more in to what we were already doing, I think says a lot about what Maidstone and the partnership were already doing in terms of standards. The lack of drivers is not a Maidstone only issue, it's national. And it's not just taxi firms, it is everybody's complaining. As you only need to watch the national news, you will hear about the shortages of lorry drivers, and every trade, every industry is complaining about having vacancies and not being able to get people to do those jobs. It's just incumbent on me to just reiterate that, as sympathetic as we are, and obviously we want to work with the trade, at the same time we've got to be mindful of the effects of what this proposal would bring if it was brought in, and we think it would be a lowering of the standards. Certainly all of our neighbours across the county are not happy about the idea that we might drop our knowledge test, because they see it as a race to the bottom, that everybody would then come to Maidstone to get some kind of temporary licence, and then potentially go and do subcontract work in their areas. I'm not saying that would happen, but it's a possibility. And equally, I've spoken to the police to say, you know, is there any statistics, any evidence that any crimes have been committed which you could draw a direct correlation to somebody not being able to get a private hire cab? They can't come up with anything. And I'm not saying, with respect to the, I think it was Mark Jones, possibly, who was reiterating the information about what had happened down outside of his office. Yeah, I'm not saying that didn't happen. Of course it happened, but nevertheless, I don't know whether it just doesn't get reported as a crime, or if it does, whether it then doesn't have an element that they can record as to why it might have happened. So there's just no crime stats to back up anything that's been said in terms of it's a public safety issue, and it will be a public safety issue. So I have to just sort of, reiterate that. In terms of what we published last time in the report, what I can tell you is that we've had a number of further knowledge tests take place. We're averaging about one a week at the moment, whereas I believe they used to run every 3 weeks or so. And the pass rate is going up and up. So at the moment, the pass rate is now up to over 26%, which is much higher than, so if I refer you to page 38 of the report, I do appreciate that this copy of the spreadsheet is not easy on the eye, and it may be difficult to read. So if I refer you to the smaller table, the middle table on the right-hand side, where it says yearly comparisons, I can just about read that. So in 2018, only 5% of candidates were passing the test. 2019, 8.67. 2020, okay, it's 2.7. I don't expect that to be higher because of the pandemic and the fact that the knowledge tests would have only been taking place in the first 3 months of the year, and thereafter there wouldn't have been any. But in this year to date, that has now shot up to 26.37%. So what we're seeing is a constant upward trend now of people passing the tests, which will, in theory, put more drivers into the pool as soon as they get their licences sorted and their DBS checks done and everything like that.
They won't have that table. They've got that's the updated one, sorry. That's what the unit's got.
That is published.
Is it?
Yeah. I'll put it in, sorry.
Could I just ask, are they first-time pass rates or overall pass rates?
It tells you in the table above what so
I've just made a note there. Was this a first, in that middle table, was this
I've got an updated version of this on my laptop, just because we got the sort of the last weeks or so added in. So if I just tell you the last 7, it'll give you an example of, it's across the board, it's not all of one and none of the other. So from the last 7, it was three of them passed first time, two of them passed second time, and the rest were third attempts. So that just gives you an idea of it isn't all first timers passing straight away, but equally it's come back. I'll just try and address some of the points that were raised, if I can, if it's helpful to. In terms of the comments made about going through all of the different tests and training to do with bus driving, this is the first time that's been mooted as some kind of what I'd call suggestion that maybe that would be possible an exemption for some allowance within the knowledge test to say somebody who's already a certain type of driver might be able to do something differently. And I'd welcome a conversation about that after tonight, because I've just spoken to Lorraine and this is the first time we've heard that being mentioned. And we'd have to look into that training and testing to see whether or not it correlates to the kind of testing we do. I'm not going to say, you know, why we do the testing we do in terms of how it compares to the bus driving test. It's a very different style of vehicle, obviously, in terms of private hire. It's like I say, it's public safety, and it's not just about the vehicle, it's about the fact that you may just have a lone driver in with a lone passenger, and it's a whole different ballgame to driving a bus and having lots of passengers. To me, I would imagine, without being an expert in being a bus driver, that is much more about how to handle that kind of vehicle, as well as your duty to the public and looking after your passengers, as opposed to spotting the vulnerabilities. I wouldn't expect a bus driver to be trained in the kind of safeguarding that we insist our drivers get trained in terms of spotting vulnerable people, and also just being much more alert to that kind of thing. In terms of, well, I've talked about the crisis of drivers again. Like I say, it's across the country and it's all industries. As sympathetic as we are, and I know the trade have been saying this for a long time. And the test questions, I'll just pick up on what Jade was saying. Well, we did discuss that and go into that at the last licensing committee, where we did a report on the knowledge test, and we acknowledged the fact that there was one particular question which had the wrong answer in, and there was only one that had the wrong answer. Others were deemed to be possibly confusing the way they were worded, and again, they've been taken out, and until they're looked at and reworded, they'll not be put back in. So, as far as we're concerned, the increased pass rate we're seeing, we're doing the right things as to the knowledge test, in the sense of, you know, listening to what the feedback has been and addressing the issues as and when they've come up. But what we are seeing is a constant, I won't say a barrage, because I think that's unkind to the trade, but what we are seeing is a consistent approach from the trade, from candidates, sorry, not from the operators, but from the candidates themselves, constantly questioning the knowledge test questions that they might have been marked wrong on, and possibly, you know, creating lots of additional work for the licensing team at Maidstone, which all that does is serve to restrict what they can do in terms of putting on even more knowledge tests and getting even more people through, because obviously we've got a big backlog of people who would have normally taken knowledge tests throughout the pandemic when we couldn't run them because, you know, the buildings had to be shut. And just one final point, because somebody said, oh, you know, you're not open. The officers are working, it's just they do the public-facing bit one day a week in terms of doing knowledge tests and doing DBS applications. But it was never the case that you would just turn up and see somebody from licensing necessarily without an appointment. That's never been the operation here anyway. But I just wanted to say that because it made it sound like the licensing service was completely shut down other than one day a week, and that's just not the case. So, so there's two parts to this report. The first part is all about this proposal, and obviously I would invite you to discuss and make your decision about that, and then we can move on to the second part of the report, which is about the actual test itself and whether or not you want to extend or not the removal of the routes part for of the test for the private hire trade.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kimmons, I think you're able to speak now before we actually open it up to committee members. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Oh, I'm on, aren't I? Thank you very much. Well, all of these guys here, this is probably the first time they've been in a room and there ain't a funeral, because that's the only time they will get together. So they feel strongly about what's being said. I'm very disappointed with the officers. No communication with these guys here. You know, most of them are 30-year plus in the industry, so they know what they're talking about. I've got to disagree with what you said about the private hire test, because I can go over to Medway tomorrow and book in to get a school run only badge without taking a test, and all I would have to do is my driving test with Blue Lamp or whoever, my medical, and my, well, I've already got a current CRB, so I wouldn't have to do that. But I wouldn't have to physically sit a test to be able to take vulnerable children to and from school. So, I can't remember what this is, the next bit. We need what's it called, John, a revision guide? Yeah, because there's no proper revision guide for the guys to actually read to take this test. It needs to, you know, you can go into the post office and buy a highway code, yet you can't get a proper revision guide for all of the streets. And basically everyone else has said most of what I wanted to say, but I just hope you're going to support what's been proposed, because, you know, to me it's a no-brainer. You should embrace the fact that the guys who've got all of the experience want to work with the new flock and bring them in. It all went to pot when we started doing everything by computer. I remember when I took my test and I actually sat in front of a guy and had to look him in the eye and take that test. And then when I'd done that, I had to take him in a car, and one of the things that he used to do was get you to drive him up the high street so he could check on the taxi rank and make sure, because he was in a car, they wouldn't notice him. So he'd check on, make sure everyone was doing what they were supposed to be doing. That's when we had a proper amount of enforcement as well. And I remember sitting on the rank myself and the enforcement officer walking down and saying, right, take that taxi now off this rank and get it washed. And I don't want to see you back again, otherwise you'll be up in the office. And you did what you was told. All right, thank you very much for listening anyway, and I hope we come to the right decision.
Thank you, Councillor Kimmons. I've got various points that I've written down that I'd like to pick up on. I'll let Councillor Garden has indicated he wants to speak, so I'll bring my points up later. Thank you, Councillor Garden.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members. We have a national problem, of course, and we have a severe local problem. Children can't be taken to school because KCC can't hire taxis. My own son had no transport to college because of a shortage of taxi drivers. The industry is 50% down now. And when I then hear from the officer this really cringe-worthy word of, well, we have to go to consultation, it really puts my back hair up. We need to do something, we need to do it now, and we need to come to a conclusion tonight. The taxi industry in Maidstone is probably, with their proposal on the table, miles ahead of any taxi industry in the country. These are great business guys who come to us with a problem, and they put on the table a proposal how to solve the problem. Now, I must say I have my reservations about certain parts of this proposal, and we can discuss that. But we need to hear that, and we need to task tonight our officers to go back to the taxi trade, formulate a proper training course, and a way into the industry which can be swiftly, which can solve an immediate problem we have. We don't need to go to consultation. We don't need to wait for months and months and months, because the problem is now. Let me tell you what we do in road haulage. And as you know, I have been in road haulage for close to 20 years. I still wear with pride my little badge on my tie. In road haulage, if you want to drive road tankers, dangerous substances, organic peroxides, even explosive and radioactives, you go to a dangerous goods course. This dangerous goods course is a classroom-based course. The training provider is being regulated by examination bodies and by the industry. The training provider has to fulfill a certain syllabus, and at the end of the training course, participants in the course will be given exam papers from the examination body and will fill in the exam papers. The exam papers, the training provider has always to provide the examination body with the dates of the examinations, the dates when the courses are being held, where they're held, etc. So an officer of the examination board can at any time arrive in the classroom. So if we are looking at this here, the taxi industry wants to run a training school, a training scheme. Personally, I think a day, a morning and an afternoon session for huge syllabus like that is a little bit on the optimistic side. Maybe we should make it a 2 or 3 day course. That is all to be debated. And at the end of the course students can take their examination there and then. And I think that we should task tonight our officers to go back to the taxi industry, work on a syllabus, work on an examination procedure with a quality control element to it, and come to this committee at the next possible earliest opportunity. And that is my proposal, and I hope I will find a seconder for that.
Is anybody prepared to second that at the moment? Or do you want to have a bit more discussion on it? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Garton. Does anybody want to speak at the moment, or shall I raise the points I've got on my list? Yes, please, Councillor Joy.
Which was desperate crisis. And then after listening to our officers, the words I did scribble down was about the complaints and the mistakes. I couldn't second what you've just said, Councillor Garton, at the moment, because as soon as you said no consultation, we should just forget all that and just do it Councillor Garton's way. I have to say I drew back a bit, because the whole point of consultations is to make sure that what we're doing is correct, and with everything it has to be a consultation, in my opinion. I think we can do a lot to help, but I think, as the officers have said, you know, there is standards, and it's a national standard that we're following, and we are in a crisis, if you like, since we've been out of the pandemic. So I truly believe that if we just suddenly change everything, and we did go with the proposals that you have put forward tonight, which I think would be a bit foolhardy, I just think it doesn't, once we've done it, there's no going back unless someone tells me that we can. So I'm not saying I've made a decision. I'm still open to debate and hoping that every councillor here tonight will have something to say, because I could sit here and say I agree with everything just so you can give me a clap and a cheer, but I've got to think beyond what's happening here now and what we've got to do for the people in Maidstone, whether they're young, old or whoever they are. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. Does anybody else want to come in? Councillor Russell.
I just wanted to ask a quick question of the officer, if I might. So is it right that we have a test where literally the pass rate is between 5 and 21% pass rate?
If you're going back to the year 2018, then that's when it was as low as 5. But the current tests from May this year, when they restarted, through to the most recent tests that we could do, it's gone up now to 26 points, well, just over 26%. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. I mean, to me, then, it would seem that the test is too hard. So something needs to be done with that. Not saying that they don't need a test, but if the pass rate is so low, something needs to be looked at.
Thank you, Councillor Russell. Sorry, Patrick, do you want to come back quickly and then I'll go to Councillor Hinder. So, Councillor Garden.
Please, if I may, I'm not proposing to reinvent the wheel here, and that's why we don't really need consultation under my proposal. What I'm saying is we're just simply changing the administration of the test. We're not changing the test. We are enabling the industry to access the test. And so therefore we don't need consultation because we'll continue doing what we've been doing, but we're taking the skills of the trade to do the right training in preparation of the test, and then get the test administered at the quickest available possibility.
Thank you. Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, Chair. This is, I think, a very complicated situation. But firstly, can I come back to you, Councillor, with regard to pass rates? One of the tests is on the Highway Code. And at a previous meeting, I did raise the issue of what I felt to be a low pass rate for people taking the Highway Code on this. And everyone agreed. And I think, you check back, that we raised the pass rate on the Highway Code to lower standards in order to get more drivers, to me, is a bad thing. We are here as a council to follow and implement national legislature. And I, for one, would not want to be party to changing that legislature in order to achieve and solve the problem we have at the moment. I'm a great believer that there are other ways in which this can be done. I have a personal experience. We talk about the knowledge test. I have a personal experience of where that, for me, failed. I deliberately hired a taxi from Maidstone, although I live in Walderslade. I hired one from Maidstone to bring me into Maidstone. And I'm afraid the driver didn't know the difference between County Hall and a town hall. And I ended up at the County Hall. But I was early, so I was quite happy to walk. But I did point out that to that driver that surely is part of a knowledge test. He should know where he's going, and he didn't. So I've experienced that myself. But also, I've listened very carefully to the statements being made about people having to wait long times for a taxi, and the correlation between that and offences reported to the police. And as far as I'm aware, I've been informed that the number of cases being informed and referred to the police is very, very negligible. So I await more evidence that's going to sway me into offering a vote to reduce the legislation, change the legislation, and put us in a situation where we may regret it later on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hinder. Councillor Nagy, you look like you're ready to roll.
I'm ready to roll. Thank you, Chairman. Can I just check a few things? Consultation, do we have to have it or not? Is it a legal requirement or not?
Mr. Harris.
It is normal practice when making a substantive change to the policy to consult on the policy. I think the suggestion's been made that this would involve a substantial change to the policy and therefore consultation would be appropriate.
Thank you for that. Obviously, half the consultation is the trade and the other half is public. So it's a bit unique what we're talking about here, I would suggest, because half the consultation people are already in the room tonight proposing a way forward. So that's one thing. And we did have a limit on this before. We were talking about 6 months maybe. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I was going to say
months?
the proposal is for 12 months. Yeah, what is being requested is that we enable drivers to operate as drivers for up to 12 months, during which time they would take the test.
Thank you, Chairman. So tonight, as a committee, could we, as a committee, agree to not have that consultation? Is it set in stone? Is it law? Because obviously, this is particularly very hard times for some people. And I think when I look at the reasons for turning it down, we're turning it down on the new national statutory standards. I would like to know when they came in.
Sorry, I'm not sure that's Mr. Harris or...
The statutory standards are July 2020.
2020. So they're not that new. It sounds like they've just come into force. It says new, but they're at least a couple of years old nearly.
Compared to the Town and Police Clauses Act of 1847, I'd suggest it's positively modern.
Thank you for that. And obviously, where the other reasons are, previously members made decisions to do different things. Well, to me, that doesn't really count as a reason we should have been given tonight, because we are here to decide on what's being proposed in these very hard times. And as has been pointed out, to have all the trades sitting there united on this new option is a very rare thing. So we are in unique times, I would say. And we, as I always say on this committee, we're not here to drive businesses out of business. We're here to help the businesses if we can. So I'm a bit disappointed that I was hoping from the previous meeting that meetings would take place and something would be proposed here tonight that officers could recommend. Because obviously, as councillors, we rely on our officers to make recommendations. So I think the statutory standards is not applicable here because of the unique times we find ourselves in. And previous decisions is not something we should be considering because there wasn't the situation we have now. And on the evidence about what might happen or wasn't happening, I was at the Great Danes last night where the Chief Constable himself, we had all the top police people at the Great Danes last night, and was very concerned about the welfare for women and young girls. And if you'd heard that last night, you would be now considering doing something like this because of vulnerability of young girls late at night not being able to get a taxi. And that is meet one of our requirements for Maidstone Borough Council is the safety of the residents of our people that live here, and especially women and young girls. And I think as a committee, I feel responsible that we should do something that the trade would like us to do. And it isn't for life, it isn't going to be set in stone forever. And I'm sure if we can appoint it, that we can also take it away if it doesn't work out. So my view is here, as an elected person of Maidstone, I would like to see something proposed, and that's why I was a bit disappointed that something couldn't be posed that officers were happy. And the reasons are not what I would really think for turning it down. And consultation seems to be half the trade are here anyway, which that's one half of the consultation. We're talking about the public consultation, but I don't think I've heard how long that consultation could take. Was that mentioned?
how long, Mr Harris, can you give us some idea of
I
that?
suggest that a normal consultation is between 4 weeks, which is considered the minimum, and 12 weeks, which is considered the norm. And in the circumstances whereby obviously you're looking for a prompt decision, then I'd suggest that potentially a 4-week consultation might be appropriate.
Thank you for that. So after meeting the Chief Constable last night at that meeting at the Great Danes, I feel that I should be recommending to the members tonight that we do something tonight. It would be obviously against everything else, but I can't be worried about other areas. I'm worried about the people of Maidstone, especially women and young girls. And we've already heard of an incident by one taxi owner there that had something crop up. And this is our problem we've got as a committee. And I'm looking at this as a health and safety issue, actually, and the welfare of women and young girls especially. So, if anything, I would like to propose that we recommend it, what's been put on the table. So I won't do that just yet. I'll wait to hear the discussions, like Patrick, and then we can make a decision on what we're going to do. But really, we are in unique times. And when you hear what the Chief Constable said last night about all the different things that have happened in Kent or lately in Maidstone and Tunbridge and Malling, Tunbridge, Wales, it is a great concern to me that we need to do something, and we can't wait for the police to come up with some facts and figures of incidents that have happened, because I'm sure they are going to happen, and hearing something that's already happened, I think that I wouldn't like to see that. And as a committee member, I would like to think that I try to do something that all the taxi drivers in Maidstone wanted to see.
Could I just interrupt you, Councillor Nagy, because I think we might need to go off a bit of a tangent and look at other options rather than just accepting this. I think
that's why I've not proposed anything at the moment, Chairman.
Other options there, I think. Just before, I've got Councillor Joy to speak, but just before that, I think Mr Littlemore wanted to come in on a few points.
Thank you, Jess. Just to pick up a few points that we made, and also to thank the trade for coming tonight and giving up their time. I'm speaking on behalf of the committee. I'm sure will express their gratitude for you for doing that. It's important that we do liaise with the trade in that way. In terms of what's been said about consultation, what I would say is I think it's wrong to look at consultation as 50% of it is the trade and 50% is the public. If you actually look at your policy, there's a whole raft of people listed within that policy that you consult with over this, and it's far more broader than the trade. Because what this policy is not about is how do we make it easy for people to become licensed taxi drivers. So I would, as an officer, my advice to you would be very guarded about ignoring consultation, moving from a position whereby the council is overseeing these tests to a position where the industry itself is self-policing in effect, I would suggest is a significant move, and that would need to be consulted over. Otherwise the council opens itself to challenge if it doesn't follow its correct practice and policy. And I think we all have great sympathy with the trade and the difficulties they're having in recruiting. And I think one of the questions that members may want to ask themselves tonight is if we do remove some of the strictures that are in the current policy, does it actually change the position that the trade finds itself in competing with Tesco's and other people in terms of recruiting staff? Will that make such a significant difference that those people would choose, given what's been said about how difficult it is to be a driver in the town centre? I'm not sure I'd agree with how the town centre was painted, but that's another debate for another day. Will that help, or will we just end up with a policy that isn't as effective as we would want it to be, and we may attract some more drivers, but that's not what this policy, as I come back to the beginning, and the points that Councillor Nagy made about the conference last night around protecting violence against women and girls, this is exactly to the heart of what this policy is there to do. And it's that I would ask members to keep in mind when you consider whether you want to remove some of the strictures and conditions around this. And the statutory standards, the government has removed or put in abeyance some of their guidance and statutory standards during the pandemic, but they didn't remove this one, and that's for good reason. So I don't think we can say as a single local authority that we should ignore that. I think that would be bad practice on our part. Thank you, Chair.
Could I just ask Sharon or Lorraine, the government, the statutory standards, does that require a test to be done? Does it require a test, or does it say they must undertake training? Does anybody know what the government standards obviously have certain things in them, and we are above those. Is a test actually a requirement?
I don't believe it's a legal requirement, but they do talk about training and then with an emphasis on safeguarding. But I will look at them while you're having other points raised or discussed so that I can give you a fuller answer. Yeah.
Thank you. I've got a few points as well. Councillor Joy, if you want to come in, but I've got a few more questions
just very
for
briefly,
officers.
because it was only in response to Councillor Nagy. You were talking about proposals, Councillor Nagy, and then right at the end you went, I'll wait. So I was just prompting to say, could I know what your proposal was, so I had time to think about it. But then you said you'd wait. So thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Does our test duplicate the EQUO test? Are we duplicating anything anywhere? We're not. A very interesting point was raised about Ashley saying by having a certain test here or having a certain licence, he could go to Medway and be granted a licence in Medway. Is there anything we could do looking at where drivers have other licences? I mean, for example, if a Tunbridge Morning tested driver comes here and says, can I be a private hire driver in Maidstone? Do we go, oh yeah, you've done the test, yeah, that's okay? Or do we go, you've got to start from the beginning? So do we make any concessions anywhere?
We make some concessions. So if they've had a medical done somewhere else, we'll accept that medical. If they've had a driving test already, we'll accept that certificate. But we are required to do the DBS check ourselves, unless they've signed up for the online service. So there are some things we can accept, and there's others that they have to do for us, like the knowledge test.
Okay. Looking at the proposal that was made, from what I can see, the only difference, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're asking not to do the test at the beginning. You're asking to do the test at the end. Okay, you can come to the microphone if you wish, yeah.
Okay, it's an extra, so the training course that we will provide will allow them to have the basic knowledge of the policy and the EQUO test, and also prepare them for taking that test. As we've heard from Jade, it takes up to 6 months to pass. So a 12-month period is what's needed, especially as I know the council are very short-staffed because we have a lot of trouble having replies to emails and inquiries, and it's the same in every business, of course. But I think that this proposal gives extra training. So when the driver has taken the test, he will have already had training. He would have already, in the EQUO and training with the policy, and then he will have to sit the test again afterwards. So you'll end up with a driver which is more highly qualified and trained than a driver that just passes the test. And as I think it was Mr. Dyer said from Cavalier, when you learn a test, you can learn the answers, but you don't understand why. And the safeguarding is very important, but they understand what they're learning and what the potential problems are. And the training would be invaluable to new drivers, and I can assure every councillor here and the officers, and I don't know why the officers don't want to work with us, because we are a wealth of experience. We are Maidstone. We want Maidstone to be a safe place. As you've heard from Mr. Jones, he's had an attack. How you guys can sit there and say that there hasn't been any problems is beyond me. And how you can defend your position, I don't know. And I really want to get on. I want to work with John. I want to work with Lorraine. I want to work with the licensing committee. I feel as if we had a really constructive chat after the last meeting. I asked for another meeting, nothing was forthcoming until yesterday, actually. And I just feel let down. And I just want all the councillors to know we've got everybody in Maidstone, all the constituents and all of the people and all of the businesses, we've got everybody's well-being at heart. We want Maidstone to be a flagship. We want Maidstone to be the #1 town, the county town it is.
I think we do accept that.
Okay, so
Yes,
that's
Mr.
what I've got to say. So I hope that enlightens you guys that we don't want to lower standards, we want to raise them. Thank you.
I do accept that. I'm just struggling with, what I'm struggling with is, I'm wondering if we could better coordinate the process so that you provide your day's training and the next day they do the test. So I'm wondering if we can do somehow try and work towards a system which is, I mean, a comment was raised about there's no revision guide. Could the trade not create a revision guide? You chaps there have got all the knowledge in your heads.
Yes, we've tried to. We've been sending candidates forwards, and as you've seen that the pass rate has been raising. Every time the pass rate raises is when we find a question wrong in the test that people have been failing on. Now this can go up and down because I believe there's like there's eight questions and they roll around and 2 are left out all the time. So if you're lucky enough to take it and you don't get the question which is wrong, you could have passed. In 2018, 3% or 5% passed.
I think we've addressed that now. I do believe we've addressed the questions. Are you saying there's still questions wrong?
I'm saying that the council refused to discuss with the trade the test and the answers to make sure that they're correct. And we believe that there are inaccuracies or misleading terminology within the test. We have trained a lot of drivers and we believe that they know all the answers, but yet they're getting the answers wrong. And you guys are not giving us a clear pathway to check that everything is correct. And with your track record, you ought to.
So would there the opportunity be then for you to email in the ones you're concerned about, and I will ask the office to respond within 5 days as to whether they're misleading or not? Because from what we're told, the questions have been reviewed, as I understand it, and we believe they're correct. But you're saying there's still misunderstandings there. So there is an opportunity to make sure that is corrected.
Listen, that's a good idea, and we would be only too open for that. And I mentioned that in an email on the 20th, that if we could sort something out, that we might be able to withdraw this proposal. But if you was to go and take a theory test, there's plenty of online practice sessions you can do. They will give you the question and they will give you the right answer. Now, why can't we have the questions and answers so the drivers can be educated the same as they are when they take a driving test, they take a CPC, or they take any other test which is in the country? It seems like that this is some big secret and that we are not allowed to have access to the questions.
I'm afraid I really have to disagree with you there. If we provide the questions and the answers, they'll just learn them without learning the subject. I'm really sorry, I can't agree with that.
I understand.
I think if you're saying there's clarification needed on wording, I fully accept that, but I do not think we can give you out a list of all the questions and all the answers, because that is not encouraging a person to learn the subject. It is encouraging them to learn an answer. So I'm afraid I don't agree.
Well,
I just think there's an opportunity. You're saying you provide a day's training. Now, surely when someone's done a day's training, that is the best time, while everything's fresh in their mind, for them to do the test. Otherwise, they've got to go away and learn it again.
I agree with you, and I feel as if we did put the day's training into place and the test could be for the day after. I do think that really quickly we would see if there are questions in the test which are misleading. I mean, I think it's loads better than it was. A pass rate of 26%. I mean, I know that a lot of foreign people take this test, but mainly migrants that come from another country to the UK are the top 5 or 10% within their country. They are the most intelligent because they are and the most driven to come away. So they should really be well capable of passing the test, but yet 3 out of 4 are failing.
This is potentially a bit of a language barrier in interpretation.
Yeah.
I'm going to make a slightly odd proposal here, that I would actually like somebody for the trade, and it could be actually, if you wanted to be, Councillor Kimmons, to sit down with one of our licensing team and go through all the questions and make sure they're clear. And let's get this sorted once and for all, because you have raised this point before, and it was concerning to us, especially when there was a wrong answer. And it's not fair if people are being asked questions and they're badly worded. I have to accept what you're saying. That's not fair. That's not fair on the people taking the test. But I do think we need to literally sit two people down.
Chairman, if I could make one more point.
One more point, then I'll go
the
back.
The ECHO test, the national standard for that is delivered in different councils in different ways. It is not a test in Medway, it's a seminar. This could be changed, and it could be a seminar in Maidstone, and a seminar, I think everyone would agree, when somebody is you know, a speed awareness course, for instance, if somebody gets 3 points on their licence, why don't they give them 3 points? Because they learn more with the speed awareness course. And it's the same with the test. So if it's delivered by a seminar, they learn more than it is if it's delivered by a test.
Okay, I take that. Thank you very much, Mr. D'Angelo. Thank you. Right. Is there the opportunity for us to do an ECHO seminar? Can we accept people if they went to do, could we ask them to go to Medway to do the seminar and we accept that rather than us, you know, as I'm trying to think of combining efforts. I'm loath to not have any tests, but I'm not happy if the test we're asking people to sit is difficult for people to understand. So I think we've had this before. There were questions where the answers were wrong. We've tried to help by taking an answer out. So we have made concessions. You know, I think there's 4 concessions we've made. We've taken away, for the moment, the routes and streets test. We reduced the time period between blocks of tests. The other 2 have escaped my head at the moment, but there are 4 things that I worked out we had done to assist. But I'm still concerned that there's obviously a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation. I'm just wondering how we could take this forward.
I couldn't advocate that we send our drivers to a different authority to do theirs. I don't think they would welcome it, quite frankly. I don't know if they would even accept them. They're quite right. There isn't a requirement to do an exam, a test, if you like. That's been our choice as how we wanted to introduce the safeguarding training. And that's when we changed the policy, would have been last year, when we brought the new national standards in, and we updated the policy in accordance with those new national standards. That would have been one of the elements that we brought to the committee discussed and agreed to bring in. And when we were considering as a partnership how we wanted to do that element of the training, one of the officers had done some research and, you know, had found this software package that delivered the appropriate training, and they felt strongly that there should be a test element at the end, that it shouldn't just be people turning up and possibly not understanding what they were hearing or being shown, and that there had to be an element that they'd got tested on it to make sure they'd understood and sort of absorbed everything they'd been trained in. There's also an element of the national standards that is suggestive that you should be testing their knowledge of English to make sure that they can converse or understand their customers properly. So in that sense, our knowledge test we consider to be delivering on that, in the sense of we haven't introduced an extra element for testing language skills because we feel that the reading element of the test is there. And if we take the test away, then we can't monitor whether or not they're able to, well, either that they've studied any of it and learned our policy, or whether or not indeed they've understood it. So that's just be the comment I'd make on that. And in terms of the national standards being a legal requirement, they're not, there's no legal requirement for us to do a knowledge test. but the legal requirement within the standards is that we must have regard overall to the standards. That's, if you like, the legal impediment put on licensing authorities, is that we must have regard to the national standards, and if we don't have regard to them, we've got to kind of explain ourselves as to why to central government, and we will invite that attention if we were to go down that road. So.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Little. I think you want to come in, and I think also Mr. Harris. So, who wants to go first?
Oh, sorry.
Mr. Harris.
Just a very brief point on. I also checked the standards, and yes, Sharon's quite right. We must have regard to the standards. So obviously, it's essential we have regard to the standards, and the standards say you should require safeguarding training, and obviously that then takes you to the point where, well, if you've required safeguarding training, how do you, for audit purposes, have assurance that then that training has been completed?
By having a test, yeah. Mr. Littlemore.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to pick up on your earlier suggestion, which I thought was one that is definitely worth exploring, which was the one about the trade providing the training session, which sounds like an excellent idea, and then we quickly tying that up with when they take the test, and that's an operational matter that your officers can go away and develop with the trade. It doesn't require a change to policy. It's something that we could start working on now, and I think that would allay your concerns about amending the policy and address the issues about what the trade are concerned about.
So if in combination we ask a member of the trade to review the questions to see if there's any further misleading questions, and then we also work with the trade to try and coordinate tests promptly after you've operated. So if you set out a series of dates when you're doing your training, perhaps we could coordinate a test session, even if it was more people than we normally have, perhaps. I don't know whether that's feasible. I think we've got 8, haven't we?
What you're asking us to do is to go away and explore all those things, which we're happy to do, and it's all going to come down to practicality. So
yeah, quickly.
And we can do that quickly because we don't need to bring a report back to committee. If you're asking us to just go ahead and make the whole system more, expedient, so that we can deliver this in a better way in collaboration with the trade, then we don't need to bring a report back. We can just do that.
I mean, the only other comment I would make is picking up actually what Councillor Russell said, in that the pass rate is really quite low. I mean, I would be expecting a pass rate to be higher. So either those trying the tests are not trying very hard, and I'm not insinuating that for 1 minute, or what you're saying in that the questions are not clear or they're a bit complex, especially for someone of English as their main tongue. Perhaps that's where we should be looking at trying to ensure the test is clear and fair, and coordinate your training course, which actually I think is a great idea. I think that's a really excellent thing that you've been doing. And I think if we can coordinate that your candidates can take the test almost immediately, within a day or two, I think those two might be a way forward. Anybody else want to comment on that? Would anyone else agree with that? Councillor Garton?
Madam Chairman, that was more or less what I was trying to say right from the beginning when I explained ADR courses, carriage of dangerous goods courses. What we don't want is the trade to be totally self-policing. This has not been on the table tonight. The trade wants to provide a quality service. The trade wants to be at the forefront of national taxi trade here in Maidstone. And by providing a training school, working hand in hand with the council, and how we administer the administration, whether the council sends the exam papers to the trade and they just do the exam on site, or whether the candidates have to come to a council office on the day later. That is something which the trade and the training provider should discuss with the council. We are not proposing a significant change, and personally I would be rather reluctant to send drivers out without having passed the test for 12 months. 4 weeks, I think, may be an acceptable maximum. 12 months, certainly not. So my proposal earlier was to task our officers to work with a trade, with a training provider, to find an education syllabus and a quality examination to provide a quality pathway into the trade at the quickest available possibility. And that, I don't think, will need any consultation. And I think we are going round the table now, have come more or less all to the same conclusion.
I mean, the wording I've got down as a possible idea, which I think is virtually what you're saying, is that officers, well, I was saying officers review the current questions in conjunction with a member of the trade to ensure clarity, and that officers investigate as a matter of urgency a process whereby which candidates can undertake the training and then undertake the test within a short period of time. Is that a sort of starting?
Can I just ask?
Yes, certainly, come back.
Can I just ask, sort of, when we're considering this to be implemented, because we've already got people booked in for tests right up to December at the moment, in January. So.
Yes, I mean, you're quite right. And what we will need to do is to look at our capacity to when that could start to be delivered from, and that is part of the negotiation and discussion we will have with the trade. But as I said earlier, that's an operational matter for us to deal with. It doesn't need to be brought back to the committee to adjudicate on. Thank you.
So if people are booked in for January, is that because we haven't got enough test slots between now and January, or because they're thinking they'll do it in January? Strange question, but...
Look, that's the amount of inquiries we've had. It's taken us up to January so far. Obviously, anybody else books on, they'll go further into January. It's because of resource, basically. We can only test the amount of people that we've got the equipment for, and that's 8 at the moment.
I think we also need to bear in mind that the trade will need to set up this school and all the rest of it to provide those training sessions that will then develop that, and I'm sure that will take a period of time as well. So even if we were to say, just for example, it will start from January, that gives the trade time to get together what they're going to deliver as a training package and gets us in a position where we can organise them to do the tests thereafter. But, you know, that needs to be a bit of give and take in order to make that happen, and we will work with the trade to make it happen as soon as it's practical to do so.
Thank you. Councillor Garton.
Yeah, the question is what sort of resources do we need to administer the test? I mean, couldn't the council just send a sealed envelope with test papers to the test centre? The test centre is invigilating the test. A council officer can attend. The test date will be known to the council. So there could be spontaneous visits by the council. And once the test papers are filled in, they'll be being put back in a sealed envelope and being sent back to the council for actually checking those exam papers.
I think
that is one way how the haulage trade is doing their tests.
Councillor Garton, I think the tests are electronic. So it's not a case of just printing off more papers. It's availability of
Would it be a possibility to print off those electronic screens or put it back onto paper? Or, in the alternative, provide the training provider with some testing software? I don't think this is rocket science, and that is something which is operational and which officers could organise.
Thank you, Chair. I wouldn't advocate that we move away from the current system. We've got a system in place that works well, and as you see, only actually of the appointments that are made, only 77% of those that say they're going to take the test turn up. So I don't think the issue is about providing more sessions. It's about making sure that those that do turn up to take the test are in the best position possible to pass the test. But we can look at the capacity. I've already said that. Going away and advocating, you know, somebody booking a place for the test to be taken in a test scenario where you can ensure that the people that turn up to take the test is the person that you're going to then licence. I think that's the reasons why we do it in our own office, so that we can have best control over those issues. If we're having to book somewhere else, we're going to have to pay somebody else to do that role. So I think the system we have is probably the best that we can do.
Could I just ask, we do how many days a week and how many tests in that? It's one test session. One test a week, 8 people. So what would be the chances then of that being 3 tests in a week of 8 people? Or is it just we haven't got the facility to do that? To combine with the training course that they're offering. So they get 20 people on the training course. Could we somehow do a series of tests over 3 days to get those 20 people through, or is that just not physically possible?
I couldn't advocate that at this point in the year, purely because this will be the busiest period for the licensing team leading up to Christmas, in the sense of any opposed temporary event notices and things like that. And it's not that we don't want to work with them at all, and I've just had that conversation with Lorraine separately as to, can we not up the numbers of candidates that can attend each test session? Is it just the equipment that is the issue? And pretty much the answer is yes. So if we bought, well, this is where John will be sort of crying, sorry, but it's true. You know, where's the money coming from to buy the equipment? That's the problem. If we can get some equipment from somewhere, more laptops or whatever, that would allow more candidates, that would be the way forward, not to put on more tests each week, purely because the resource required to get the staff in, the rooms booked, everything, it's going to cost, and it'll take them away from their other duties, which it's all statutory. You know, everything that we do is statutory requirements, and it's not, unfortunately, just taxi licensing. It's a dominant part of what we do, but premises licensing would suffer.
Okay, so when we do the day's testing, how long does that take? Is it a morning or is it an afternoon? And could we double up on one day?
Well, we do the knowledge test in the morning, the echo test in the afternoon. So the echo test takes 2.25 hours because it's 3 parts, and the knowledge test takes 90 minutes. And going back to paper means we'd have to mark them manually, which would take longer.
But the room is available, isn't it, Madam Chairman? Sorry for butting in. If the room is available, it's just a question of getting an invigilator. And if the trade or
and
the
laptops,
training provider...
And laptops. It's not just the room, it's the laptops, isn't it?
Are the laptops not in this room permanently, or how does it work?
We've got eight.
What we're saying is we've currently got the equipment to have the test done by 8 people. If we want to increase the number of people who can attend each test, we'll have to buy or appropriate from elsewhere in the council the equipment in order to facilitate that, because without either an iPad type thing or a laptop, they can't do the test, and they can't bring their own equipment because the software is only loaded onto our equipment that we log into for security reasons. We can't have, we couldn't allow the software to sort of be sent off to somebody at home, for example, to do it. It has to sit within a secure system.
Chairman?
Just one second. I think if I could, I know you want to chat. If you could chat quietly, because I think it's making it difficult for the people at that end of the chamber to hear, the members to hear. Councillor Joy and then Councillor Garton.
I'm not going to say I'm heartened by what we've been saying, because I know, and just from everybody else coming in, there's lots of things that we'd like to do to make things quicker, slicker, and to help. And every time it comes up, we're being given reasons. It's not just, oh, we don't want to work with the trade or whatever. I can see the officers are, you know, I can see them trying to work at this. So all I really want to say, Chairman, is I think the proposal with you and Councillor Garton, in my opinion, is a good proposal to start with. And I'd like to just say, if it can be another proposal or not, just to say the officers will continue to do all they can. If there's something that comes up that they can do more, then I feel quite confident that I think the officer has understood after listening to the trade and some of my awful words I wrote down that they weren't happy about. I'm hoping that that's going to change a bit, and perhaps working together with the proposals that you've come up with will let us move forward. Otherwise, we're just going to keep coming up and down with all these different ideas that are not, you know, not within our gift to give.
I think we do understand, but we've got to be cautious about we are concerned about taking the test away. So I think we've just got to find a way forward which works for everybody, which may mean that officers investigate urgently, I would say, a way of coordinating the test and verifying the questions, coordinating the test with your training course as a matter of urgency, and see how quick. I'm just mindful, we're talking January when we've got the Christmas season coming up, but it's such a tight time period, I'm not sure we can deal with it in time for Christmas. Councillor Nagy.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to remind everyone the council's new system. When workers go in, they have to book a table with the laptops. So I'm sure that we can book a table, book a room and have the laptops there, because that's our new system, isn't it?
We do. We have a block booking for room 6E. That's where the test happens every week.
If we book a bigger number, then we book in advance. So I think we've got over that problem already, because that's our new council system. Thank you.
I think if we just tweak the recommendation that officers investigate increasing the number of, the amount of equipment available to enable the number of tests to be increased, I think that would possibly. So I think we're nearly there. So sort of working between me and Councillor Garton somewhere along the lines, that the committee asked that officers first, as point one, review all the questions in the current test in conjunction with the member of the trade to ensure test questions are clear. And that's a good one, thank you. So, officers be requested to review all the current questions in the test, in the knowledge test in conjunction. Is that the equo test as well? Or is it mainly the knowledge? It is just a knowledge test, thank you. If you bear with me 2 minutes, we're just trying to throw some wording down, thank you. Thank you. I think we've got something. If I ask Olivia to read out, there's 2 recommendations here, and I'm happy to accept, comments and suggestions. So I'll go to Olivia. Thank you. So we've got two recommendations that we're going to put on the table, and then we've got another bit of our recommendation, which was about the extension for a further 6 months of the suspension of the knowledge test. And I'm just being advised that it would be better to take those in a vote at the end. So if we can, I'll read these out and we'll get the wording right, then we'll put them to one side, discuss part 2, and then hopefully we might be getting somewhere.
Thank you, Chair. So, members, given the discussions that's taken place, I think the wording that's sort of most appropriate to enact what's being supported is that officers be requested to review all of the questions in the current knowledge test in conjunction with a representative of the taxi trade to ensure questions are clearly understandable. And 2, the officers be requested to coordinate the provision of knowledge tests with training courses provided by the taxi trade and investigate the possibility of extra equipment to provide additional places on test days.
Anybody got any clarification, or are we happy with that wording? Councillor Brindle.
I thought the word urgent was in there somewhere.
I think you're quite right. Officers be requested to urgently coordinate the provision of... Okay, I'll read them again at the end before we vote on them. So unless anyone's got any comments of those, I'll put those... Yeah,
Was there also something mentioned about it following the training? So that it would still be fresh?
I believe that was the second proposal. That's how I understood it to mean.
Shall I read it? I think what we had for the second one was officers be requested to urgently coordinate the provision of knowledge tests following any training courses provided by the trade and investigate the possibility of extra equipment to provide additional places on test days. I think that probably enables you to go away and look at that. And Mr. Little.
Chair, can I just make one minor amendment?
Please do.
Where you've said any training session, if we can just change that to the agreed training session so that we're all clear about what training session we're talking about when we do that negotiation with the trade.
Okay.
Thank you.
Councillor Garden.
I'm not happy about the word investigate. I wanted a stronger word, like seek or something. Investigate means, yeah, we're looking at it, but we'll probably just come back to this committee over it. I think we need a stronger word like seek. Or I can't think of a better word if somebody can help me there.
But no, I think it's investigate. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I'm not doing this very well today, gentlemen. I do apologise, gentlemen and ladies. Thank you. We are trying. I assure you, we are trying to find a way forward. It may not seem very quick for you, but we are. What I'm being told is that what we're actually doing is we are technically not accepting the proposal that's on the table, but replacing it with these recommendations. So I'm just going to clarify whether we actually have to vote on the recommendations as per the papers. In which case, the first one is in respect to the proposal to introduce an alternative badge scheme for private hire new drivers. Officers recommend refusal to implement the proposed alternative badge scheme. So do we still have to vote on that proposal? Or can we replace it with the alternatives? We don't? Okay. As long as it's clear to people that we're not accepting your proposal. Yes. So I will propose, or Councillor Garton, whichever, can propose the motions that I've just said. We'll fight over the exact wording at the end, but if we propose those two motions, I can propose and someone else can second, or Councillor Garton, whichever. Councillor Garton, do you wish to, as you were first, to try and suggest this way forward?
I'm happy to second if you would like to propose.
Thank you. So I will propose the motions, and they are seconded by Councillor Garton. We'll leave those on the table and fight over the exact wording later if everybody's happy at this stage. And then we'll go to the second recommendation, which was in respect of the routes part of the knowledge test, to extend the routes not being part of the test for a further 6 months and then review again, which this will enable officers to assess how many new drivers has passed since the trial began. So I don't know if we wish to discuss this or if members are just happy to extend, to vote on that and extend the suspension of the routes and streets test part of the knowledge test. So if you're happy, then shall we come back to these three recommendations and vote on them? So, do you want to read them or shall I?
Could you just clarify when you said the route section, is that for a further postponement or January?
It's 6 months. It's another postponement for 6 months. So you can use that wording if you wish. So you can use that wording in there.
Yes.
Do you want me to read them or do you want to read out those recommendations?
Whichever you
Yeah, I'm happy for you to read them. Right. 1 second, they will read those three recommendations and then we can vote on them. I think we're making progress. Thank you. So I'll ask Olivia to read out the three recommendations and then we can take the three together or we can vote on them separately, whichever you wish.
Thank you, Chair. So just to make sure, members, that I have the correct wording for what has been proposed and seconded, it is that officers be requested to review all of the questions in the current knowledge test in conjunction with a representative of the taxi trade to ensure questions are clearly understandable. 2, officers be requested to urgently coordinate the provision of knowledge tests following an agreed training course provided by the taxi trade and investigate the possibility of extra equipment to provide additional places on test days. And then 3, that the route section of the knowledge test be removed for a further 6-month period to be reviewed again by the committee.
So has anybody got any questions on those or are we happy to vote on those? Happy to vote. So all those in favour of those three recommendations? Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We do appreciate your passion and your attendance and your involvement. I know we look like we're an awkward bunch, but we do appreciate it and we are genuinely trying to find a way forward. Ashley.
Can I just say the representative that the trade want is Jade?
Is Jade. That's fine. If everybody's happy for that, then we'll... Is Jade happy with that? Okay. Thank you very much. So that is agenda item 13. Thank you. I think, Councillor Hindy, you're going to leave now. Thank you very much. Thank you, gentlemen. Oh, God, sorry, that was... so... Members of the committee, can I just say we've got, I think, 2 more items on the agenda. Would you like a 5 or 10 minute break, or do you wish to just roll on and see if we can roll on? Right. Thank you very much for everybody's input on that. I think we're trying to help. It's a case of how we help without compromising on our standards.
The main thing is, Chairman, that every one of them went home a bit happy. And we're not here to make work for officers or anything, but I think because of the circumstances, we all agreed very positively, and I'm not here to make work for officers, but it just had to be done, something like this. It just had to be done.
Get there. Thank you, Councillor Nagy. Right, so moving rapidly on, agenda item 14 on page 52 of the agenda, and I have got here that it's in... Poor Lorraine again. Lorraine, thank you.
Good evening, members. Hopefully this one will be quicker. Go. Good. Oh dear. Okay. The purpose of the report is to ask for members' approval of the licence fees and charges for the financial year 22-23. The various fees are set out at 2.6, 2.7, 2.9, 2.11, 2.13, the amended table at 2.15 and 2.16 for implementation on the 1st of April 2022. The fees and charges are reviewed on an annual basis as part of the budget setting process. As there's been no major significant change in the time taken or the various tasks involved in the production of licences, permits and consents since 2016, when fees were subject to robust review, it is recommended that a 2% inflationary increase is applied to all fees. This is in line with the Council's medium-term strategy 2021 to 25-26, which hopefully will also assist the trade by not applying any undue financial hardship on them. Any variation to taxi fees requires us to publish a public notice advertising the proposed new Hackney carriage and private hire fees, and the report makes the recommendation to members that the fee levels are set out at 2.7, 2.9, 2.11, 2.13, 2.15, 2.16 of the report for implementation on the 1st of April 2022 be approved, and that the fee levels set out at 2.6 of the report for implementation on the 1st of April 2022 be approved, with any consultation responses received to be presented to the committee for consideration before that fees implementation.
Thank you, Mrs. Neal. Has anybody got any questions or comments on this as an opener? Councillor Garton.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, ideally I don't like to raise fees, but I think generally looking at the fees across the whole table, they are all in line with inflation, and we had a substantial review of all fees not too long ago when I was sitting on this committee a year or two ago, so I will not really pick on the figures. Just to labour one point at 2.3, for the current financial year, for the period April 2021 to September 2021, there's currently an income deficit of £19,446. If we buy a couple more laptops to provide more tests, I'm sure we can drop that amount.
Thank you, Councillor Garton. Councillor Joy.
You know, Councillor Garton, I was actually sitting here thinking he's got him before me and he's going to say he's going to agree the recommendation. Then you went and spoilt it again. So I'd just like to agree the recommendation on page 52. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody wish to second that? Councillor Nagy. Thank you. Before we actually take a vote, does anybody else wish to comment on this at all? I mean, the only point I had was that deficit of 19,446, I presume that's because of COVID and the drop in numbers. That's purely the reason on that. Thank you, Lorraine. It's the correct one, yeah. So, actually, Olivia's just picked up, but the wording should say that the fee levels set out at 2.7, 2.9, 2.11, 2.13, the amended 2.15 and 2.16. Okay, of the report for implementation be approved, and that the fee level as set out in 2.6 of the report on the 1st of April 2022 be approved, with any consultation responses received to be presented to the committee for consideration before that fee's implementation. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. Item 15, which is on page 65. And this is the Gambling Act statement of licensing principles. And Lorraine, thank you.
Okay, the purpose of the report is to ask members to consider the consultation responses and any proposed amendments to the draft Gambling Statement of Principles Gambling Statement of Principles. Maidstone Borough Council are required to develop, consult on and publish a Gambling Statement of Principles every 3 years. The document sets out the principles we propose to apply in exercising our function under the Gambling Act 2005 for the 3-year period ending in December 2025. The current policy has been in effect since December 18, but needs to be revised and republished before the 31st of January 2022. Licensing Committee considered the draft policy at their meeting on the 16th of September 21, where officers were authorised to undertake a 4-week consultation which ran from the 28th of September to the 25th of October 21. An extensive list of consultees were contacted directly and a public notice published on the website inviting comments. The consultation resulted in 3 responses received, which can be seen on page 69, and page 69 to 70 deals with the comments and the officer's response. It's not felt that the draft policy requires amendments as a result of those comments received from the consultation, and so members are asked that the consultation responses received be noted and that full council be recommended to approve the draft Gambling Act 2005 Statement of Licensing Principles Policy 2022-25 as attached as Appendix 1 to the report.
Thank you. Councillor Garton, is that from your previous comment, or you'd like to speak on this one? Thank you very much. Does anybody wish to speak on this? Councillor Garton.
3 responses to consultation. It's not very successful, especially since the second one by GambleAware.org basically is a very generic response, not very heartening, this whole thing. However, there are 2 very valid points being made. Question to Mr. Harris probably. Is public health, can we consider that as a licensing objective? And then I have another point after that.
Mr. Harris.
It's difficult, frankly, because they're not, so in fact, the licensing officer will correct me if I'm wrong, but they are listed as a statutory consultee. No, they're not a statutory consultee. No. So there you go. So yeah, and then ultimately in relation to adding public health, then it would be for legislation rather than the council to do that.
I thought that would be your answer. I am, however, very, very grateful to Staplehurst Parish Council's recommendations when they say, whilst there's reference to alcohol and drug addictions, there's no reference to gambling addiction. Could that reference actually be included in the text? Because that's a very valid point.
Do you wish to respond, Lorraine?
The policy is the gambling policy, and so it assumes that we have considered everything from a gambling perspective. And the reference they make to the alcohol and drug addiction is referenced in the part about local area profiles, which kind of gives you the sort of instruction on how to undertake a local area profile. And what they're saying is that when you are looking at areas of gambling addiction, you should mind take into account the facilities in the area which have alcohol addiction and drug addiction, because the three go hand in hand. So if you were to ever investigate and come, you know, do another local area profile, all three things would be referenced. It's just not discussed in the policy because it is the gambling policy.
So are you happy that it is covered, though it isn't actually specifically stated in the wording?
No, I'm not happy, because it's sort of a bit of an academic debate. We are writing a policy to state the obvious. Policies always state the obvious, so why don't we on this occasion write the obvious into the policy?
Could we add it in? Sharon?
I'll just add something which might, I don't know whether this will further illuminate anything or leave you feeling exactly the same way. The reference to the drug addictions and alcohol addictions is because we will often see, certainly in more built-up areas, specialised clinics to deal with those kinds of things. You do not, as a norm, tend to see a clinic set up to deal with gambling. So when we're talking about the local area profile and those risk assessments, what it's talking about is having an extra thought process to, if you get an application for example, for a betting shop, that you shouldn't put it right next door to a drug rehabilitation centre or a centre that deals with, because it is known that there is a direct link between people who've got those kinds of problems who will then go and gamble because it's on their doorstep. And it's about making sure you don't put all of, if you like, the melting pot together to make the worst case scenario. So referencing gambling harms, there'd be nothing wrong in putting it in, but the reality is there aren't centres out there, you know, there aren't things there that you could reference to say, you can't put this betting shop here because there's gambling harms in the area, because there's nothing to evidence it anyway. There's no statistical information that's generally collected that shows area profiles of where problem gamblers either live or work, and it would be almost meaningless to put it in. But I'm not saying you can't put it in, I'm just saying that's why it's not referenced. I hope that is of some assistance.
I would just say, if you, as the licensing officers, are confident that it would be a consideration and that it would never not be considered, if you don't consider the wording has to be in there, I'm happy to accept it.
I mean, the gambling policy covers premises in our area, and we haven't got many. Most gambling addiction is actually online, and that's not something that we police.
That's a good point, thank you. Councillor Garton, are you prepared to accept that?
I just see that Councillor Joy is trying to speak, so I just throw it open to debate. I think a policy is a document of stating the obvious, and why can't we state the obvious here? But
that point is noted.
I leave it to members to discuss.
Point taken, Councillor Garton. Councillor Joy.
Just to say, I think you covered the question when you just asked the officers. And just to say, from past experience, I don't think we ever get very many replies back to the consultation. So I looked at it and thought 3. Was that 3 more than last time? I wouldn't know, but I do remember it being very similar. And I'd just like to think that now it is online, electronically, that hopefully more people are looking at it than maybe before. So I don't want to be the one to say it again, but I'm quite happy to propose the recommendation on page 65.
Thank you, Councillor Joy. Anybody like to second that proposal? Councillor Brindle, I think you were there first. Thank you. I was just going to say, I think probably the fact that there were only 3 responses is either lack of interest or actually that it isn't that controversial. Because I think if it was controversial, we might have had more. It's a good document. So on that basis, the motion has been proposed and seconded. Can we take a vote to accept the motions as per the papers? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much, members.
Very positive meeting and well chaired, Chairman.